material present in this video are in public domain and free to use. Chapter 4: Early Troubles. Until the beginning of the 19th century, when Mexico became independent of Spain, the Philippine Islands were governed for Spain by that country. This worked great hardship in the islands. Mexico herself was a dependency of Spain. And so the Philippines really became a dependency of a dependency. All laws for the country were made in Mexico. And in this way the islanders were removed one step farther from the foreign ruler who was their king. The High Court of Mexico appointed the Governor-General, and at the same time that it did so named the man who should succeed him. This it did in order that there might be no time lost in filling the office when it became vacant. When Legazpi died, therefore, his successor was already appointed, and at once took up the duties of his office. The new Governor-General was named Guido de Lavazares, Guido da Lavazares, and he was a very different sort of man from Legazpi. He was more warlike and less wise. And he liked to meddle in matters which did not concern him. During his term of office, he went to the aid of a king of Borneo who had been dethroned by his rebellious subjects, and helped the king to regain his throne. He was so elated with his success in doing this that he became ambitious. He so far forgot common sense that he wanted King Philip to let him and his Philippine forces make war on China and conquer that country for Spain. He could not have done this, and the King of Spain was too sensible to let him try. Later, however, the Governor-General had all he wished of fighting the Chinese. After Legazpi's death his grandson, Juan Salcedo, went on with the work of setting up Spanish rule in the islands. He passed through the northern part of Luzon, and wherever he went told the people that Philip II was their king. He made it a point always to make friends with the great chief of any tribe to which he went. This chief he would win over to swear fealty to Spain. Then Salcedo would leave him to rule as before, only in the name of the king. He promised to help the chiefs against their enemies, and was ready, with his soldiers, to fight their battles whenever they needed him. In turn he trusted them to be loyal to the king, and to keep their people from rebelling. He did not try to improve the country in any way, or to teach the people anything that would help them to make it better. His one idea was to win territory for his king. This, indeed, was all that the king wanted him to do. Spain wanted much territory, a wide dominion, more than she wanted loyal subjects. It was this greed for power and for wealth that caused her downfall, and in the end lost for her the rich country which she had gained at great cost. Salcedo, after all, was a far better man and kinder to the people than were most of those who came after him. He had much of that wise kindliness which made Legazpi a good ruler. He took the country by force. But he was not a tyrant. He did not oppress the people, nor did he make unwise laws to govern them. He made his headquarters in Ilocos Sur, meaning to rule the northern provinces from there. He had, however, hardly settled down when news reached him of a great danger that threatened Manila. Gathering all his forces he marched southward as fast as his army could travel, to help Martin de Goiti, who was still in charge of Manila, to defend the city. It was this same danger, which so alarmed Salcedo, that gave Guido de Lavazares his wish to fight the Chinese. It was a most unexpected danger, and came without warning upon the colony, at about the time when Legazpi was founding his capital at Manila. A Chinese pirate named Li Ma Hong, was sailing the waters of the China Sea. He led a large force of men as lawless as himself, and, as time went on, he became the terror of sea-going folk all about there. He grew so bold, and his pirate fleet so strong that he dared to attack even the great war junks of China. At last the Chinese government declared him an outlaw, and put a price on his head. After this the China Sea was not a safe place for him. So he made up his mind to go somewhere else. He had captured the crew of a trading junk, and from these men he learned about the Philippine Islands. What they told him pleased him so much that he decided to go to Manila, take the city, and set up a kingdom of his own on Luzon. He felt certain of success in this undertaking, for he had a fleet of 62 armed junks and a force of 4,000 fighting men. In his company were many tradesmen as well as soldiers, and many women went with the fleet. He also had plenty of supplies, and Li Ma Hong was sure that, once he had taken the country, he could set up a colony. He took with him, on his own junk, the crew of the captured junk, to pilot the way, and with his fleet sailed for Luzon. In November 1574, they reached the north coast of that island. Here some of the pirates, who went ashore for supplies, sacked and burned a village and killed many of the Filipinos. Those who escaped made their way to where Salcedo was, and told him what had happened. Thus it came about that the Spanish captain learned of Li Ma Hong's scheme before the pirate reached Manila. Leaving the northern part of Luzon, the Chinese kept on along the coast toward Manila, before they came to the bay. However, the fleet was caught in a typhoon. Several of the junks and some 200 men were lost in the storm. Still, Li Ma Hong thought he had a force strong enough to take Manila. So they went on. The pirate commander landed an army of 1,500 men before Manila, and sent them up to take the city. They were led by a Japanese named Seoko, whom Li Ma Hong had made his lieutenant. And in a few hours a savage fight was waging between the Spanish and the Chinese. The Spanish force was small, but well armed, and every man knew that he was fighting for life against a cruel foe. No mercy was to be looked for from those wild pirates, and no quarter was asked or given. Even the aged governor-general bore arms in the fight, for every man was needed. The first Spaniard killed was brave Martin de Goiti, but he was not the last. The little garrison was nearly destroyed before their fortune turned and the pirates were driven back. The Japanese leader Seoko was killed, and after that the Chinese fell back and re-entered their junks. A few days later Li Ma Hong himself led a second attack. But meanwhile native troops had been gathered, and again the pirates were beaten. This time the fleet retired to the mouth of the Agno River, and Li Ma Hong set up his kingdom in what is now the province of Pangasinan. Here the Chinese built temples and began to plant crops and engage in trade. They felt very secure, and if they had been let alone the pirates would no doubt have been prosperous. But punishment was at hand for them. Juan Salcedo, with his soldiers, had reached Manila, and soon afterwards a war junk from China came into harbor, looking for Li Ma Hong. This war junk was sent by the emperor, who had learned of the mischief the pirate was doing in the Philippines. The captain had orders to find Li Ma Hong and bring him to justice, and he meant to do this if he could. The junk joined the Spanish in an expedition by water, while another force of Spanish and Filipino soldiers went forward to engage the pirates on land. When these attacking forces arrived, Li Ma Hong saw that he must retreat for his life. So he played a trick upon the enemy and upon some of his own soldiers. He told off some of his men to go forward against the enemy, and make the latter believe that they were the main body of the Chinese. The trick was successful. When the Spanish and native troops made the attack, the pirates, after a show of fighting, began to fall back toward the mountains. The enemy gave chase and furnished Li Ma Hong the chance for which he was watching. With all his fleet he slipped down the river, keeping under cover of the reeds and tall grass, gained the sea and fled, leaving his soldiers at the mercy of the foe. The Chinese, thus meanly deserted by their leader, did not wait to be killed, but retreated in earnest to the mountains. Here they took refuge with the Igorots, and here they spent the rest of their lives. They married women from among the Igorots, and from them are descended those people who are today known as the Igorot Chinese. It was some time before peace and a sense of safety were restored in Manila. Work was pushed more rapidly on the city walls, which were still building, and upon Fort Santiago. Other troops of Spanish were sent from Mexico to make the defense of the city stronger. But long before they came, Salcedo went back to his work in the north. He died of fever in Ilocos Sur a year or two later. Captain Salcedo was still a young man, but 27 years old, at the time of his death, March 11, 1576. Had he lived longer, he would doubtless have become a great statesman, for he showed much tact and wisdom in his dealings with the people. He was honestly mourned by both the Spanish and the native soldiers of his army. A few years after his death, his bones were brought to Manila and laid to rest beside those of his grandfather, Miguel de Legazpi. Summary. Up to the beginning of the 19th century, the Philippine Islands were governed as a dependency of Mexico. The High Court of Mexico named the Governor-General and made laws for the country. Legazpi was succeeded by Guido de Lavazares. After Legazpi's death, Salcedo went to Ilocos Sur to carry on his work of subjecting the country to Spain. In 1574, the Chinese pirate Li Ma Hong made an attack on Manila, meaning to take the city and set up a kingdom there. Driven back from the city, he retreated to the mouth of the Agno River and settled there with his pirate band. A Chinese war junk came to the help of the Spanish, and Li Ma Hong was forced to flee. He escaped, deserting some of his own soldiers whom he had sent inland. In 1576, Juan Salcedo died in Ilocos Sur. Questions. Describe the government of the archipelago previous to the 19th century. Who succeeded Legazpi? What sort of man was he? What did Salcedo do after Legazpi's death? What was his method in dealing with the people? Give an account of Li Ma Hong's invasion. When did Juan Salcedo die?